Chapter 14 of Gulliver of Mars. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by James Christopher. Gulliver of Mars by Edwin L. Arnold. Chapter 14. That woodman friend of mine proved so engaging, it was difficult to get away, and thus when, dusk upon us, and my object still a long distance off, he asked me to spend the night in his hut, I gladly assented. We soon reached the cabin where the man lived by himself whilst working in the forest. It was a picturesque little place in a tree overhung lagoon, thatched, wattled, and all about were piles of pleasant scented bark, collected for the purpose of tanning hides. And I could not but marvel that such a familiar process should be practiced identically on two sides of the universal ether. But as a matter of fact, the similarity of many details of existence here and there was the most striking of the things I learned whilst in the Red Planet. Within the hut stood a hearth in the centre of the floor, whereon a comfortable blaze soon sparked, and upon the walls hung various implements, hides, and a store of dried fruits of various novel kinds. My host, when he had somewhat disdainfully watched me wash in a rill of water close by, suggested supper, and I agreed with heartiest good will. "Nothing wonderful, O Mr. Bluecoat," he said, prancing about as he made his hospitable arrangements. "No fine meat or scented wine to unlock, one by one, all the doors of paradise, such as I have heard they have in lands beyond the sea, but fare good enough for plain men who eat but to live. So, reach me down yonder a bunch of yellow aru fruit, and don't upset that calabash, for all my funniest stories lurk at the bottom of it." I did as he bid, and soon we were squatting by the fire toasting arus on pointed sticks, the doorway closed with a wattle hurdle, and the black and gold firelight filling the hut with fantastic shadows. When the banana-like fruit was ready, the man fetched from the recess a loaf of bread savoured with the dust of dried and pounded fish, put the foresaid calabash of strong ale to warm, and down we sat to supper with real woodman appetites. Seldom have I enjoyed a meal so much. And when we had finished the fruit and the wheat cake, my guide snatched up the great gourd of ale, and putting it to his lips called out, "Here's to you, stranger! Here's to your country! Here's to your girl, if you have one, and death to your enemies!" And then he drank deep and long, and passed the stuff to me. "Here's to you, bully host, and the missus, and the children if there are any, and more power to your elbow," the which gratified him greatly, though he probably had small idea of my meaning. And right merry we were that evening. The host was a jolly good fellow, and his ale, with a pleasant savour of mint in it, was the heartiest drink I ever set lips to. We talked and laughed till the very jackals yapped in sympathy outside. And when he had told a score of wonderful wood stories as pungent of the life in these fairy forests as the aromatic scent of his bark heaps outside, as iridescent with the colours of another world as the rainbow bubbles riding down his starlit rill, I took a turn and told him of the commonplaces of my world so far away, whereat he laughed gloriously again. The greater the commonplace the larger his joy. The humblest story, hardly calculated to impress a griffin between watches on the main deck, was a masterpiece of wit to that gentle savage. And when I took off the tricks and foibles of some of my superiors, heaven forgive me for such treason, he listened with the exquisite open-mouthed delight of one who wanders in a brand new world of mirth. We drank and laughed over that strong beer till the little owls outside raised their voice in combined accord, and then the woodman, shaking the last remnant of his sleepy wits together, and giving a reproachful look at me for finally passing him the gourd empty to the last drop, rose, threw a fur on a pile of dead grass at one side of the hut, and bid me sleep, for his brain was giddy with the wonders of the incredible and ludicrous sphere which I had lately inhabited. Slowly the fire died away. Slowly the quivering gold and black arabesques on the walls merged in a red haze as the sticks dropped into tinder, and the great black outline of the hairy monster who had thrown himself down by the embers rose up the walls against that flush like the outline of a range of hills against a sunset glow. I listened drowsily for a space to his snoring and the laughing answer of the brook outside, and then the ambrosial sleep which is the gentle attendant of hardship and danger touched my tired eyeballs, and I too slept. My friend was glum the next morning, as they who stay over long at the supper flagon are apt to be. He had been at work an hour on his bark heaps when I came out into the open, and it was only by a good deal of diplomacy and some material help in sorting his faggots that he was got into a better frame of mind. I could not, however, trust his mood completely, and as I did not want to end so jovial a friendship with a quarrel, I hurried through our breakfast of dry bread with hard-boiled lizard eggs, and then settling my reckoning with one of the brass buttons from my coat, which he immediately threaded with every evidence of extreme gratification on a string of trinkets hanging round his neck, asked him the way to Ar hap's capital. "Your way is easy, friend, as long as you keep to the straight path and have yonder two-hump mountain in front. To the left is the sea, and behind the hill runs the canal and road by which all traffic comes or goes to Ar hap. But above all things pass not to the hill's right, for no man goes there. Thereaway the forests are thick as night, and in their perpetual shadows are the ruins of a hither city, a haunted fairy town, to which some travellers have been, but whence none ever returned alive." "By the great Jove, that sounds promising. I would like to see that town if my errand were not so urgent." But the old fellow shook his shaggy head, and turned a shade yellower. "It is no place for decent folk," he growled. "I myself once passed within a mile of its outskirts at dusk, and saw the unholy little people's lantern procession starting for the shrine of Queen Yang, who, tradition says, killed herself and 1,000 babies with her when we took this land." "My word, that was a holocaust! Couldn't I drop in there to lunch? It would make a fine paper for an antiquarian society." Again the woodman frowned. "Do as I bid you, son. You are too young and green to go on ventures by yourself. Keep to the straight road. Shun the swamps and the fairy forest, else you will never see Ar hap." "And as I have very urgent and very important business with him, comrade, no doubt your advice is good. I will call on Princess Yang some other day. And now good-bye. Rougher but friendlier shelter than you have given me no man could ask for. I'm downright sorry to part with you in this lonely land. If we ever meet again—" But we never did. The honest old churl clasped me into his hairy bosom 3 times, stuffed my wallet with dried fruit and bread, and once more repeating his directions, sent me on my lonely way. I confess I sighed while turning into the forest, and turned back more than once at his retreating form. The loneliness of my position, the hopelessness of my venture, welled up in my heart after that good comradeship, and when the hut was out of sight, I went forward down the green grass road, chin on chest, for 20 minutes in the deepest dejection. But thank heaven, I was born with a tough spirit, and possess a mind which has learned in many fights to give brave counsel to my spirit, and thus presently I shook myself together, setting my face boldly to the quest and the day's work. It was not so clear a morning as the previous one, and a steamy wind on what at sea I should have called the starboard bow, as I pressed forward to the distant hill, had a curiously subduing effect on my thoughts, and filled the forest glades with a tremulous unreality like to nothing on our earth, and distinctly embarrassing to a stranger in a strange land. Small birds in that quaint atmospheric haze looked like condors, butterflies like giant fowl, and the simplest objects of the forest like the imaginations of a distorted dream. Behind that gauzy hallucination a fine white mist came up, and the sun spread out flat and red in the sky, while the pent-in heat became almost unendurable. Still I plodded on, growling to myself that in Christian latitudes all the evidences would have been held to betoken a storm before night, whatever they might do here, but for the most part lost to my own gloomy speculations. That was more the pity since, in thinking the walk over now, it seems to me that I passed many marvels, saw many glorious vistas in those nameless forests, many spreads of colour, many incidents that, could I but remember them more distinctly, would supply material for making my fortune as a descriptive traveller. But what would you? I have forgotten, and I am too virtuous to draw on my imagination, as it is sometimes said other travellers have done when picturesque facts were deficient. Yes, I have forgotten all about that day, save that it was sultry hot, that I took off my coat and waistcoat to be cooler, carrying them like a tramp I was, across my arm, and thus dishevelled, passed some time in the afternoon in an encampment of forest folk, wherefrom almost all the men were gone, and the women shy and surly. In no very social humour myself, I walked round their woodland village, and on the outskirts by a brook, just as I was wishing there were someone to eat my solitary lunch with, chanced upon a fellow busily engaged in hammering stones into weapons upon a flint anvil. He was an ugly-looking individual at best, yet I was hard up for company, and so I put my coat down, and seating myself on a log opposite, proceeded to open my wallet, and take out the frugal stores the woodman had given me that